All right, next thing I want to talk about, Jalen Carter. We talked about him on Monday. There's a rumor going around that the Steelers are ready to trade up for him at 9. I think that number is specifically 9 because the Chicago Bears and them have had conversations. So you don't know if it's just because that report has come out and that's just the number that people have set themselves up in their mind, or if they're willing to and had conversations with other teams to kind of move up a little bit closer. What I've done is I've reached out to as many people as I could around the league to try to get a scoop on where those within the top 10 have Jalen Carter going in the draft. Drew Rosenhaus's agent has obviously been very, persistent of he's going in the top 10. He's a top 10 pick. We're not even worried about it. He's met with everybody from 5 to 10, including the Chicago Bears. So what I got is there is almost no chance he's making it to 9. The number that has been very persistent in my, research and talking to sources around the league and people familiar with different teams around the league is that the Seattle Seahawks are almost all in on this guy, that they have a very hard time believing. Everybody else has a very hard time believing that he's going to fall past 5. If they do, they're ready for it. But everybody expects Pete Carroll and the Seahawks to be the team that goes after him. Apparently Pete Carroll loved this guy and, he doesn't see any issues with it, with his off the field stuff and, thinks that he could turn him into something. And I kind of agree. Like if there's a coach in the NFL, I think it's Mike Tomlin, but I think a number 2 would definitely be Pete Carroll. Like that's a good name to bring in here and kind of keep things quiet, keep the drama down, so on and so forth. But I have a hard time sitting here right now saying that Jalen Carter is going to get to 5 just from what I've heard, or get to 9 just from what I've heard. Is that too high up in the draft? Or the Pittsburgh Steelers officially ruled out of the Jalen Carter race if we're looking at him as the top 5 pick in the NFL draft?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think it's that the Steelers don't have the capital to trade for a top 5 pick, but I don't think they want to. I don't think they will, and I don't think it's worth it, quite honestly, to move all the way up to 5. Like, that's the difference between. I think you have to start dipping into next year's picks if you're looking to move all the way up to 5. 9 is maybe a different story where you could maybe get away with 17 and 49. It would maybe take 3 picks or whatever, or a player or something like that. You start dipping into things that you really don't want to dip into if you're the Steelers, if you're looking to move up to 5 versus 9. I don't know. It seems like a very small difference when I say it out loud, but I don't know. The difference between 5 versus 9.
Yeah, it's pretty significant. Like your top 5 pick, you're looking up to. It's just like the whole thing with the trading up to 1. Like, there's a certain number where you draw the line where it's like, okay, well, these teams can't move up to 1 because they just don't have the draft capital to do so. It kind of feels like 9, moving back from 9 to 17, if you get the right team, is understandable, especially a team that doesn't have a major need. The Seahawks were a playoff team last year who have the 5th pick in the draft because the Denver Broncos traded for Russell Wilson and gave up the whole world to be a bad football team. Seattle's not looking at this like, oh, well, we could just take anybody. They're looking at this, we're going to get Jalen Carter. Are you kidding me? Like our defense is already good enough to make the playoffs, but now we're going to get Jalen Carter. I just think that that's really difficult. Just for an example, in 2019, when they traded up for Devin Bush, they gave up their first pick, which is number 20, their second round pick, which is 52, and then a third round pick the year after to move from 20 to 10. That's pretty good. I would say that's why my thought was 17, 49 and a second next year gets you to number 9 for the Chicago Bears. But I still think that those 5 spots to number 5, chances are you're giving up a first round pick next year, or at least a second round pick and probably 2 more picks this year. And I just, like you're giving up a lot for a guy that doesn't fill an immediate need for you. And I'm still on very much so the Jalen Carter's the best player in the draft board, and I think that I don't think I'm going to jump off that train anytime soon. But I just think that, at some point you got to draw the line. And I think anything above like 7 is the line for me. I think it's just going to be too difficult. And I think the Seattle Seahawks is the hardest team because you're not going to have to do it with Seattle. You're going to have to do it with Detroit or with who's for Indianapolis. And that's not going to happen. So you just, you fall into a funk where you're like, oh, well, is this even possible? Because like, what are the Seattle Seahawks going to give up Jalen Carter for pick 17? Like that doesn't make any sense for them.
Yeah. Well, especially because they have a very specific need. Like, the difference between trading with
Yeah,
the Bears, who are just kinda looking for the best player available, it seems like, versus the Seahawks, who had, like, I think statistically the league's worst rushing defense and are just looking for someone to plug
oh
the middle.
really?
Yeah, like, they have a very specific need. They're going after defensive linemen, so if they can get Jalen Carter, they are going to take him. That's different from the Bears, who could be looking for a weapon to put around Justin Fields, who could be
Yep.
looking to back up their defense too. Like, there's a lot of directions they could go. The Seahawks seem very focused on one
Yeah.
guy.
Yeah, I don't think it's possible. It's upsetting that the Jalen Carter story only lasted a couple of days. You never know. Something could happen. Will Anderson could find himself sliding to 5, and then the Seahawks have a question or have a decision to make there. Maybe they're all in on Tyree Wilson. I couldn't tell you.
Mm.
All I could tell you is that from noise around the league, from what I've gathered, is that the Seattle Seahawks want their man in Jalen Carter. Unfortunately, that's too high for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Anything could happen on draft night. It was fun while it lasted.